Good morning. 9:15 on Monday, the 2nd of March. I'm delighted. We've had a bit of back and forth. Unfortunately, Gemma, it's her birthday today. So hello, Gemma. When you watch this, she's woken up not feeling very well, and it's her birthday, which is really sad because I was all going to get you to sing her a happy birthday. But we'll do that. We'll do have a belated birthday next time she's in a panel. So we'll start in reverse order, normally start alphabetically, but we will understand when we get to it. And I will be saying things about me every now and then. But we'll start with Graeme to introduce himself, his genres, of which there are many, and the pick one of your, ideally the latest or the book you would like to promote, the main characters in your latest work. So we'll go Graeme, then Denise, who hopefully we'll see at some point, and then BB Elsin, Beth, and then Andy. So Graeme, over to you.
Good morning. Um, you've said that I write multiple genres, which I kind of do, but you made it sound like there's so many, and there's really probably, I mean, my main focus is on crime or thrillers, whichever way
Yeah.
you want to view it, and that's what I concentrate on at the moment. I have in the past written a novel which is arguably a fantasy. That's certainly the setting, but it was written as a thriller. So it just happens to have that fantasy setting. That was Carrion. I also wrote Raven's Gathering, which again, in my view, was a thriller, but it had elements of fantasy and horror. My partner, when she read it, actually said the only genre that wasn't in, or genres that weren't in there were young adult and romance, but I think that was probably stretching it a little bit. Um, but basically, yes, I write thrillers. In terms of my current writing, I've said is more clearly crime. And I, last summer, I released the first of a series about a character called Rand Scott. And the second one in that series should be out in the next, hopefully, 6 weeks. So, hopefully, in time for the festival in April.
Okay.
Um, and I have to say, where Rand is concerned, whilst I enjoyed writing as a character and creating this character, it came as a real surprise to me at how well he connected with readers. You know, it was just when reviews were coming in, it was all about how great this character was, whereas I was expecting it to be more about whether it was a good plot or not. Clearly, he has had an impact. Funnily enough, my favourite characters within that story are relatively minor characters, but they're
Oh,
just funny and fun to write. So,
right. Well, I'm
um,
the same with mine because in After Jessica, that there's two in one there. After Jessica, I was going through my emails and I'd had very rarely get them, but I had an email from a reader saying how much she enjoyed the book, and was there going to be a follow up? And somebody else asked me that actually for a short story, and I said that it kind of that one ends at the right place. I feel, but there was a character in that, a minor character, a bit of a thug, who likes there's one scene where he goes into the main character's house, and just to mess with them, he leaves a book in the sink. And then that's it. That's the only change in the house. Leaves a book open in the
right.
sink. And I had such fun with him that I think I'd like to bring him back. So do you think you'd bring that character, make that character more, bring him forward and do something?
The one in particular I'm thinking of, I don't ever see him being anything more than a minor character, but
Right.
he will be a regular character. Uh,
Mm.
I've said book two is due out shortly. He's in that and he is important to that, but he's
Right.
not in there like all the way through.
Yeah.
In book three, which I think I'm on draft three at the moment of, again, he's in that. I, I don't. I think. I think if I was to make him a main character, he would start to bore me because
Okay.
he's in such because when he does appear, he has
Yeah.
quite an impact.
Right.
Um, uh, he's not intentionally, but he is funny. I think he's
Yeah,
funny, and I think
yeah,
other readers have said so. But no, I think it'd be like too much if you had him all the way
yeah.
through.
It's nice though that you brought him back because I think
Oh,
readers do engage with the characters. There's one of Katie Ford's I read, and she said that when I spoke to her, met her through she was a judge for a competition I was involved in, and she said that she'd really enjoyed Monica. I kind of can't even remember the main character's name, but her best friend was Monica. And she said, "Oh yes, I loved writing her too. Maybe I should bring her as a main character." I don't know whether she's ever done it,
mm.
um, but there we go. Denise, morning. We
I just realised I'm still shown as a post attendee, which is for some reason that seems to be interfering with the camera.
okay. I don't think I can do anything about that because you're showing us
It's-
camera on here.
I've lost all of your images now. I'm just looking at the Zoom screen.
Oh, do you want
Really
to log
weird.
out and come back in again?
I will do. I think that might be better.
Okay, we'll move on to Beth and then we'll come back to you.
Oh, I'm back.
Oh,
Sorry. Well, I got
oh,
you back. Just haven't got myself.
oh, okay. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Okay.
Don't worry. If yes, I'm not sure if I can do it, but I could superimpose. I don't know if I'm that technically able in iMovie to superimpose your a still on top of you, but hey ho. So let's hear from you, Denise. Or
Okay, thanks.
you
Well, yeah, I sort of multi-genre in a way. With a background in sort of working in investigation and research and also intelligence analysis, I started out actually writing local history little books because I was part of a local history and heritage group. And then I moved on to writing thrillers, espionage thrillers, based on some of my own exploits overseas. And one of the characters, well, two of the characters in there were a sort of middle-aged intelligence analyst and a husband who was a early retired detective, a murder detective, who basically, after retirement, was taken on as what they call an experienced hire for MI5. So the couple were both working for MI5. And then I decided I'd like to try my hand at cozy crime, which, as you probably know, is a bit gentler. And, there's no sex, no swearing, and the violence is not as graphic as usually in thrillers. And so what I decided to do was give my couple, Carol and Dave, early retirement and move them from their hectic lives in London out to the Chalfonts to this nice little cottage. And of course, at first they wonder if they've made the most awful mistake because it's really rather too quiet. But then they start realizing as they join the U3A, and Carol is in the local history group and is tasked with researching local scientists and people of note for their group project. She suddenly starts discovering an historic murder. And when she goes and starts investigating that, the sister of the murder victim is also murdered in a very similar fashion. So basically, I've plotted out 13 novels in the Cozy Crime series, all set here in the Misbourne Valley in the Chalfonts. The series is called Misbourne Murder Mysteries. And I've not really been promoting it very hard because what I'm hoping to do is find an agent who might pitch it to Bentley Productions. They're a film production company who are just a mile or two from me in Pinewood Studios. And what they like to do is to save on location costs, they like to film locally. So I thought, what better series of stories to film locally than a series that's set locally?
Mm.
So that's my sort of grand plan, which probably will never come off, but
Well,
you've
I was
got to
going to
have a
say
pipe dream.
it's not done Robert Thorogood any harm because the
Mm.
Marlowe mysteries are on at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, I'll
Did
tell
you?
you what's funny as well. I went to a talk by Robert Thorogood, and somebody asked him, was it a good idea to set it in the town where you live, or has it been a mistake? And he said, well, really, to some degree, it's been a mistake because he said, even though I've lived here for so many years, I've made mistakes in the books.
Mm.
And he pointed out that on one book, he's got the three lady detectives coming out of the church and turning right onto such and such a lane. And almost everyone in Marlow got in touch and said, no, you turn left to get onto. So what I've done is I'm sitting here in the village of Chalfont St Peter, which in the book is Chalfont St George, because I thought it won't upset people. But what I've also done is because I'm in a very active family history group with the U3A, they're really brilliant people, and they're such great researchers and investigators. They can trace long dead ancestors, they can knock down brick walls in research. So I keep saying to them, you'd make fantastic detectives, you could solve a murder with no trouble. So that gave me the idea that all the characters in my little, what I call the third agers, the people in my books who are researching local murders.
Yeah.
They're all based on people in my group. And so I had a ready-made audience for the books to start with. They all, which one's me? Which one's me?
Yeah. Well, that
But
ties really
obviously,
nicely in with the question I'm going to ask later.
oh, right.
Thank you,
Okay.
Denise. Beth, BB Elsin, morning.
Good morning,
Good morning.
and thanks for having me on the panel.
You're very welcome.
My main genre for non-fiction is fantasy, but not the kind of fantasy with dragons. It's historical fantasy, lots of political intrigue. I also produce anthologies of short stories, many of which have a historical theme. So you won't be surprised to know that the main characters, in fact, a lot of the minor characters as well in Heroes and Traitors are based, I wouldn't say based on because their stories go all over the place, but they're inspired by real historical characters. So the main character, Jonis, he is based on Gustav Adolphus of Sweden, in his time known as Lion of the North. Um, Interestingly enough, one of the popular characters is Simo. He's a maimed veteran of the Civil War, and he is based on Gerard Winstanley, who wrote Light Shining in Buckinghamshire. So an Aylesbury hero, if you like. Um, so so yes, that's how I start with my characters. Some uh, historical inspiration. Um, but a lot of what happens to them has happened to different characters. So some of the things that happened to Ionis happened to Napoleon or um, others that cross my path, and as I'm creating the stories for them.
Okay, thank you. Andrea, good morning, Andy.
Morning.
Morning. Morning. It's lovely to see you here. This is your first panel, so perhaps
Yeah.
a little daunting, but you are ever the professional. Do tell us about you and your book.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm really surprised you're calling me professional because I'm a real amateur compared with all the rest of you who have a number of books under your belt. I've only written one book, and it's non-fiction, and it's a true story of a major general in the political intelligence in Syria. And I knew him before he ended up in a dungeon, and he ended up with me in lockdown, so I got to know him pretty well. Um, and he was the one who wanted me to write his story. So I had a character there already. I just had to sort of put it on the page and get his feelings and his words into the book in a sort of a coherent way. So it's actually been a collaborative story rather than sort of coming out of my own imagination. And I did quite a lot of research into what was happening in the background in the Middle East so that I could verify accounts and cross-check everything. So it really is a truth of what is happening in Syria, both before the war and even back through to colonial times.
Wow.
So
I think even though you have a physical person there, it's not that different. I'm sure Beth and Graeme and Denise will agree with you that, and John in a recent panel John Lynch said that he has his character over his shoulder, Billy, I think his name was, and they talk to us. And I think J.K. Rowling was quoted as saying that, well, she'd planned to kill off a particular character in book 7 because she plotted everything ahead of time, and when she'd got to that point, the character didn't want to be killed off. So it sounds very flippant to say that our characters are real people, which of course they're not. But I think readers do get so engrossed in a book, and especially I switch off, and I very rarely don't have my editor's head on, and is an editor as well. That we do, it kind of does take over, and we do imagine them to be real people. So I think there is an overlap between us, how we believe, and we have to believe in our characters, that everything
I
is
certainly
happening.
found when I was getting to the point of thinking, oh, yeah, this is so difficult. I'm lacking motivation, and one of the characters would pop up and very kindly suggest that I had a duty to them to keep going.
Right. Oh, I like that idea, the duty to them. Is there anybody else? We'll go with you, Beth. Is there anybody in real life that you think you would make a good character? Not necessarily in your series now, but in something you'd like to write.
Oh gosh, I mean, so many. I'm fairly careful about not thinking of current personalities in politics or even sport, because I like sport, and trying to borrow them to start my thinking on characters. But inevitably, these people are the history of tomorrow. Um, I suppose in recent history, one of the things I've been meaning to do for a while is buy Alan Johnson's latest biography of Harold Wilson, because I think he is a fascinating political character, very much underrated, considering some of the things he achieved in his short periods as Prime Minister. Um, so, um, so yes, I think once I'd read the detail about him, I might well be thinking that's going to work into a character at some point.
Mm. Graeme, do you ever um, think not necessarily base your characters on somebody, but pick up, because I think
I
we
think
do, don't we? We pick up
there are
aspects from different
traits that
people.
you pick up.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a in so I might as well pull the book up
Yeah,
in
do.
Borderline.
Yeah.
There's and actually he recurs in book 3. There's a villain who I won't name, just because I'm going to refer to the person. Physically, I described this guy and it's somebody that I used to work with, and I have to say he was a lovely bloke, but physically he had certain characteristics which lent themselves to um, almost caricature. You know, there was clearly a lot of vanity there. This bloke was not a particularly attractive bloke, but he had there were things he did with his hair. There were things, and it just so I could not help. It was just like I've got to use that somewhere,
Yeah.
and I chose to use it with a villain because it just the vanity just helped to, I don't know, just make him seem even worse than he actually
Yeah.
was,
And that's
and at the same time make him laughable. We want, I'd anyway want to see things about a person who's a bad guy and actually laugh at them. Mocking them seems like better revenge than anything else that you can do, and so it was a good opportunity to do
yeah.
that.
Well, I when I lived in Northampton, I had a next door neighbour who was sexist and basically every ist going, and so I used him. He owned the local shop, and so every time I needed a not very nice shopkeeper, I'd base it on him,
Yeah.
and I killed him off
Yeah.
occasionally, which was very satisfying. I think we do if we've got characters that there is something about killing people off is very therapeutic. Even in my romances, I managed to have somebody widowed or somebody killing them off in something.
I think also not just to kill them off, but also to, let's say, like mock them, to
Yeah,
trivialize them, to
yeah,
make them you know that they see themselves as being something significant, and to actually take that significance and chop it down to size, even if
yeah,
it is only in a work of fiction,
yeah. No, exactly.
that's very satisfying.
Yes. But the thing is, I came to writing when I was 38, and I thought I've had a fairly ordinary upbringing, ordinary life. I was a secretary. I didn't really have anything that was I felt was right worthy. And but I've watched a lot of television. We live life, we meet people, and I think once you become a writer, you never switch off. If you're out walking the dog or in a pub, there's always something, and you think, oh yeah. And so I have a notes section on my phone, and I'm forever dictating things onto that, thinking just the way somebody walks or their mannerisms or something they've said,
Yeah.
made perfect. And you never know what you're going to use when. But there are always, I think, inspiration out there for characters everywhere.
Mm.
Denise, is there somebody, because you've met so many people in so many countries, is there somebody you'd love to use but can't in your
Not
book?
really. I think as was it Jilly Cooper who said that all the characters in her books were based on friends of hers, people she knew, and as long as she changed the name and the hair color, they absolutely had
Right.
no idea it was them. And in fact, yeah, if really reflecting what Graeme just said, um, I used to have an attachment to, shall we say, another government department, and I remember being in their canteen on numerous occasions when I saw this man who was absolutely hideous. He was quite obese. He would be, although there were healthy food options on offer, he would be eating, the sort of roast with gravy, and then he'd go on to the sponge syrup pudding and custard, and then
Uh,
he'd buy a Mars bar to put in his pocket to take back to his desk in the afternoon. And I remember looking at my contact there and saying, I can't imagine him working for you. He doesn't look the slightest bit like James Bond.
oh,
And I was told, no, no, he's on loan from another government department still, and he's known as the hacker's hacker. He is fantastic at sort of investigating IT systems. He can hack into anything, anywhere, and so he's a desk jockey essentially. And I thought that's an interesting character. I'm going to use that, and I did kill him off. But I also amalgamated him with somebody else I knew who was perhaps more of a James Bond figure, who's actually, without giving too much away, he was assigned to my office when I was with the Home Office. And I remember thinking, there's something not right about this guy. Something is off. Every now and again, his public school accent would slip, and
ooh,
there were just one or two things. He showed me pictures of the wonderful house where he lived and his
right.
garden, essentially. And I thought, not on your pay scale, there's something really wrong here. So I did a bit of inquiring myself, and by dint of getting a very nice young chap from his organisation, getting him tanked up one night on wine. And I said, that's a strange business about Chris, isn't it? He said, oh, you know about that? I said, oh, yes, he told me. So suddenly, of course, this guy spilt the beans. And
Right.
the reason the guy was seconded to my office was because he was on a disciplinary while they worked out what to do with him. A bit like the Shayla case, they could hardly sack him because he knew too much.
Right.
But at the same time, he'd been guilty of something really, really, really bad. So they palmed him off on the Home Office, which many people in the intelligence world consider as a punishment duty to be sent to the Home Office. So I amalgamated those two characters in my first thriller, which was The Hunt for Wotak. And in fact, he became Wotak, who was a guy who was able to blackmail people, high-ranking people by hacking into their communications. And he came to a sticky end. So I really, really enjoyed that. But the other funny thing is, I don't know if any of you peeps, whether you actually have a character based on yourself. But I remember my daughter saying to me, I've worked out who you are, Mum, which character's you, because she remembers me in my heyday as like go-ahead chairman of the PTA, turning up at school to collect her, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase, and she said, I've sussed out who you are. You're Helena Fairbrother, the soigné, confident head of MI5, aren't you? I said, no, actually, I'm Carol, the dumpy former secretary turned intelligence analyst. That's me,
Right.
Mrs. Marks and Spencer. And she said, oh, but yeah, I found it was very helpful for me to put myself into the books with my background and the training and the experiences that I've had. But I've no plans to kill myself off.
No, let's hope not. No, absolutely. Well, my brother reckons that this one, the Serial Data, is my autobiography because she's 5 foot. Well, I've made her 5'10". I used to be 5'10". I'm now apparently 5'8 3/4, and with a fluctuating weight. And she has to date 31 men in 31 days, and I used to date not that many in that amount of time. But yes, he calls it my autobiography.
Hmm.
Um, Before we will see whether Beth and Graeme, and I know Andy said to me when we were chatting the other day off screen that she has had, like you, Denise, has had a fascinating life. And I said, well, it sounds like it's something you should write. And either too modest or too shy or too something, and said, oh no, I'd never do that. I've forgotten what I was going to say now. Beth, we'll go on to you. And there was a question I was going to. Oh, Denise, yes. Have you watched the Mick Herron Slough House series with Gary Oldman?
I haven't because unfortunately we haven't got the TV channel that it's on, but I
Yeah.
read the first book, and although I really, really liked the premise, I thought it was very reminiscent of the Charlie Muffin books from yesteryear. I can't remember, was that Brian Fremantle? But the other thing I found with the books, the Slow Horses, the first 84 pages, nothing happens.
Right.
I was,
I understand they get better because
yeah,
I've read the first one and was surprised. Not it wasn't bad, but
No.
it wasn't as good as I expected it to be.
Right.
But having read up on it, I understand they do get a lot better. So it might be worth persisting with if you're curious, Denise.
Yeah.
I
Well,
will, Graham, thanks.
Husband Tim, he reads sci-fi mostly. Probably 99% sci-fi. Occasionally he'll read crime. And he likes sort of old school Wilbur Smith, that kind of Clive Cussler. But he every time Mick Herron brings a new book out, he reads his, loves him. And I took him to he did a talk at Buckingham Literary Festival a couple of years ago, and we went to see him there. And he's in the very enviable position of having a publisher who don't want him particularly to be on to spend time marketing because they want him to stay at home and write, which is what we'd all love to do, spend our time doing that. But Beth, going back to Denise was saying she asked whether any of you had written about if any of your characters are inspired by yourself.
Probably not. I mean, I write about periods which, well, I mean, even going back to the 1950s, it would be scary to be back there. I think, outspoken women and neurodivergent women, we just would have had such a rough time. So. Yeah, I mean, I really do try and get out of myself and look for very different people to write about. Um, I suppose that, on my website, I do have a blog, so I do occasionally write about writing experiences. Um, And I think that, yeah,
I think we do
what
put
do other
ourselves.
people, I wonder whether other people would say, well, I can see a bit of you in that character. One really weird thing happened with one of my textbooks, which was a friend, not in the sales community, but an IT specialist. He bought my one of my textbooks on sales management. And he said, "Oh, that was a great laugh. I could really see you coming through in that." And I thought,
Mm.
what? It's a textbook. So who knows? Maybe I'm doing it and I just don't realize.
Yeah, because I think we do, don't we, in our writing? It's inevitable that our voice. We say about authors' voices that our voice
Mm.
comes through.
I actually think that we read different authors because we like their voice.
Mm.
Mm.
And when I read a book, it's all about the style and the way it's put together. And I feel with the character, I can see the dark side of the good characters, the good side of the bad characters. And if there's more depth in them, I believe in them. If they're sort of one-faced and they're just one idea,
Yeah.
I don't actually sort of relate to people because that's what we all are, you know. We have our good days and we have our bad days, and I think good writing expresses that.
Yeah. Because you edit mostly non-fiction, Andy.
Yes, I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've started off with academic texts, dissertations from English second language students.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't come from a fantasy creative background particularly,
Mm.
but I do like playing with words and I love reading.
But I think even in a non-fiction book, because there's often an introduction, especially if it's something not necessarily just self-help, but if because all generally non-fiction books, especially sort of business books, are there to help people learn something.
Yeah,
And I think the voice, this sort of authoritative voice, has got to come through from the author to, even if it's, without being derogatory, saying, not saying, "Oh, I know everything about everything and you know nothing, so therefore I'm teaching you." But there's got to be something, I'm sure, when you go through other people's books to help them improve it, that there would be something you suggest that to help with the author's voice in that
yeah,
respect.
yes. Yeah, I always think when you are supporting writing, I put it into sort of three words, SAP, style, audience, and the purpose, the reason that you're writing. And very often people forget that they're actually writing for an audience. You know, the words go on paper, but they don't really think about the person at the other end who's
Mm.
actually going to be reading it. So that's very much the way I sort of approach all sorts of writing.
Well, my dog detective, I always go the wrong way. My dog detective there, that's the first one in the series, is doing another blog tour. It had a blog tour at the time. Donna Morfitt's organising a blog tour for me, and the first review went up last night before last, and it started off, but the tagline on the review was, "Who is this for? I have no idea, but I don't care because I can't remember the exact wording, but who cares because it's fabulous," which is great. And then the reviewer goes on, Sam, to say, "Well, initially I thought it'd be for children because it's about a talking dog." But then there are certain themes because he's a lab dog in for a company that's trying to find a cure for multiple sclerosis, and so there are serious elements to it. And even by the end of the review, and having read the book, Sam says, "I still don't know who it's for, but I loved it." So up to a point, it doesn't matter. And that's
Yeah,
the thing I've learned with my books, that I've written them because I enjoy writing them, but I haven't thought so much of who would enjoy it because I write quite quirky stuff. And so if I find quirky readers, then that's brilliant. But I've learned, and there is a phrase, right to market. that you have to really appreciate who your audience would be, and yes, write something that you enjoy, but also consider who would be buying it, and tailor it to a point for that.
I wonder whether, I mean, because we're self-published, uh, clearly, I mean, I enjoy quirky as well, and I think very often things which are quirky, experimental, different, don't fit neatly into one genre with its tropes. Um, that's considered not commercial. So I think we have the freedom
Oh,
to
absolutely.
write for ourselves, and
Yeah.
I mean sometimes it means that we go to market knowing that we're very niche, but there's plenty of choice for readers out there who want to try something different. Whereas I think if we just had traditionally published work, there'd be very little that was different because they're all looking for celebrity whodunits and that's right.
Well, I have heard agents saying, once a book has been successful or they've taken on a book that they really like, then they want the author to write exactly the same thing but different. And so, I mean, it didn't do Barbara Cartland any harm writing 700 and something, boy meets girl, they don't get on. It was Pride and Prejudice, boy meets girl.
Yeah.
They're going to end up together, but they don't like each other, or they do like each other, but something gets in their way. And then by the end of it that they're going, Ivry Mills and Boone is they can't get together and they're sparring, but by the end they fall in love, because that's what readers expect from that kind of book. Graeme, do you
Yes, I've
have
been very
do you
quiet.
have you in your books?
Do I have me? Yes, but not overtly, not. There's not like a character that is clearly me. There's just parts of me in different characters. You
Mm,
know, the in Raven's Gathering, I was one of the secondary characters. I didn't realize I was until I finished writing it. But there were so many similarities, their interests, their previous profession, all that kind of thing. It just fit. The Actually, in Carrion, the sort of more fantasy one, actually probably more my son there than me. But that may be because it started out as a children's story. You would not read it to children in its current form.
yeah.
And actually, sorry, while I'm mentioning that, I'm going to go off on a tangent here. Um, the I can't think who somebody made a comment earlier which triggered this thought. But in its original form, Carrion, sorry, quick, yeah,
Yep.
didn't uh, it it didn't connect. I sent it to my editor, who is not Esther, my current editor, but sent it to him, and he sent it back. And one of the key observations on it was that the villain was not was just a cipher. Uh, yeah, things he was doing were bad, but there was no depth to him. And as a consequence of that, I went in and I completely rewrote that, and I gave him a much bigger backstory, and he took on a much bigger role within this. Um, And I know one of the reviews I got afterwards was when Graeme Cumming writes a villain, he really writes a villain, And I
Yeah.
just thought, oh, but that was the editor's input,
Yes.
and I know I'm going off topic, but it was important to get that right
Absolutely.
because having the depth of character, you understood why this guy had become so bad. Although it offered an element of sympathy for them, he was still, I think everybody wanted him dead by the end. It was so it was important to do that. going back to the original question about me, arguably there are elements of me in Rand Scott in Borderline and next one with Renegade, but I think it's largely because I've deliberately made him about my age, or rather my age at the time, because I made it a few years ago for a variety of reasons which are not related to character. Um, so basically, he has the same timeline as I do, and that means he has a lot of the interests that I do. So music, which does appear quite a lot, it reflects my musical interests. I'm not, I'll hastily add, as violent as he is, or indeed as brave, although he doesn't come across as a heroic character at all. But yeah, there are elements that are there that are me, and I think that's inevitable that you are, and I think we've touched on it already. You are going to pick up on elements of you, and you probably scatter them amongst quite a few of your characters, really. Uh, and what I've actually found is that when I'm writing a character or I'm writing from their point of view or whatever, I almost I almost kind of immerse myself into that character like an actor. I'm not an actor. I've never done any acting, but it's how I imagine an actor must feel, you know. Anyway,
Thank
I've
you. No, that's
ranted enough on
great.
that.
Denise, are there any characters written by other authors who have stuck with you? Again, putting you on the spot, but ones that you perhaps not necessarily wish you'd written, but ones that you would, if they brought out a new book, you'd go out and buy it because of the character.
Well, yeah, I mentioned earlier the Charlie Muffin character, who is very much like the main character in Slow Horses. And I thought that was so believable because I have met Charlie Muffins. Charlie Muffin is a very down at heel, scruffy character, but he's a very good spy, if you like, a very good intelligence man. And I think that probably inspired me to write my character Wotak, who was the extortionist in The Hunt for Wotak. But I think that's the main thing, really. Otherwise, my most of my characters are based on either people I've known or amalgamations of people I've known. And that gives me a lot of pleasure as well because I have a lovely lady friend of mine who she's one of life's perpetual volunteers. She volunteers for everything. And whenever I say I'm going to do an author event, she says, "How can I help?" Immediately she's there. And she's in my U3A group as well. And so I'm very keen to make her the nicest possible character in my stories as well. She's her character name is Kitty Walker, which is not too dissimilar from her real name. But she's just one of life's little quiet heroes, and I think she deserves to be in everything. So I think in real life, she's my favorite inspiration for a character.
Right. Well, Tim said that I haven't watched them. We got Apple, but on Tim's rattles through series because he's got the kind of job that he's sort of extra cover, so that when things go quiet, he can have the television on. So he watches a lot of TV downstairs. And he said he'd never pictured Gary Oldman as that character, but he nails it absolutely. I mean, he's so versatile anyway. That he absolutely nails it. Have you got a character that you can or an actor that you would have as one of your characters, Denise?
Well, I'd love to have Jane Fonda playing the Carol, which is me, because
Okay.
I've been told often I'm Jane Fonda's double, but I think what they mean is I'm twice her weight.
Oh.
So no, I
Oh.
don't know. I think sometimes you do have an actor in mind when you're actually writing a character. And it's always a worry to me that because I always worry then that I'll end up writing the script of something that actor's been in, unconsciously, if not
Right.
consciously.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm more likely to base my characters on people I know, ordinary people
Yeah.
and people I've worked with. And I don't know if other people do this, but there's always that element of that really, really awful person you've worked with, and you want to get a bit. Well, you mentioned your unpleasant ism guy,
Yeah.
and I think there's an element of you wanting to get your own back. And I've worked with, over the years, thankfully, a very small number of really thoroughly unpleasant people. And so I like to work them in if I can.
Yeah. Beth, do you have somebody in mind if your book were made into a film? Obviously, they're based on or inspired by historical characters, but actors, alive or otherwise, who you'd like to play a particular character.
Well, one that I think one of my beta readers made a connection. The Spy Master is a character that I think would suit Ian McKellen.
Oh yes,
Thinking of him as Gandalf,
yeah,
but some of the other roles that he's played where he's just got that edginess that he's trying to achieve stuff and occasionally he has to do bad things for the greater good and yeah so I have imagined the spy master or Ian McKellen as the spy master.
he's brilliant, isn't he? He's like Gary Oldman. He could almost,
Mm.
within limits, almost play anything. We do have a question for you in the chat, Graeme. But firstly, is there do you have any actors in mind when? Because sometimes I'm sure, even if we think that the likelihood, especially of being self-published, is more difficult for us to be picked up by Hollywood. Whether there was to be an actor, because I know the furore when you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, Tom Cruise and Jack
Tom
Reacher.
Cruise, yes. Alan Richardson in the TV series is just fantastic.
Yeah.
But do you have has anybody said to you, or so and so would make a really good actor or actress for one of your characters?
Yeah, because funnily enough, I expected to imagine certain actors in certain roles in my books, but I never have been able to. I've got like in Raven's Gathering, there's the lead character uh is a sort of he basically he looks like a surfer dude. And I cannot think of anybody that I would put in that role, and it certainly wasn't based on me. Um, but when Borderline came out last year, then again, I'd never had any thoughts about who might play Rand Scott, but the one of the reviewers said that she, all the way through it, imagined a probably slightly older and slightly, I can't remember how she put it now, slightly seedier version of
Which
Richard
is what.
Armitage.
Oh, I love Richard
Ooh,
Armitage.
ooh.
Yes, always had a soft spot for, especially in Vicar of Dibley.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh no, I know he's very popular with the ladies, which is
yes,
anyway, that's a different
yes.
story.
But that's a
So,
bit worrying when you say that Rand is loosely based on you, but that indirectly is comparing you to Richard Armitage. So
no,
you
no,
know,
no.
big
But
tick.
but no. But I just didn't, I just didn't see it. Although, funnily enough, since that seed has been sown,
Right.
I'm
You can
now
see him now.
fighting against imagining Richard Armitage
Yeah.
playing Rand when I'm writing about him.
Right. Well, Richard Armitage is greying now, so
Yeah, yeah,
if he's the right age, then
yeah,
why
yeah,
not?
yeah.
Yes, dear Richard, dear at Richard Armitage dot X, Twitter, whatever. Yeah. Andy, should your book be made into a film? Do you have any idea? Have you talked about the possibilities of who might play NASA?
A dream more than talking, I suppose.
Right.
I suppose Thomas Levin would be the one character who would look most like him
Mm,
and have the same sort of aura about him.
mm.
Um, but most of the characters would be Middle Eastern characters,
Mm,
um, and many of them not very nice people.
mm,
But yeah, I only really thought of the main character, Thomas Levin.
right.
So,
Have you got the book handy to show us?
um, shall I go and get it?
Do.
Yes,
Yes,
all right.
do. Because
Yeah,
we
I
can,
will.
if you
Yes.
then you can open up the cover
All right.
and have
Okay.
a look. Yeah, no problem. Um, while she's doing that, Graeme, Jill
Yeah.
has asked in the chat. Like Graeme, I think aspects of my own character surface in various characters in my book. Do panelists who appear wholly as themselves in their story ever have a problem with reader questions requiring an answer that feels too soul-bearing? So, Denise, we'll go come back to you in a second, Graeme and Andy, when
That's
she
right.
comes back. Denise, given that you are Carol, apparently. Does this apply to you when you're asked about? We just moved on to the next question, Andy, but we'll come back to you in a
Okay.
second.
Yeah,
Denise,
it was funny actually because I was at a funeral, a friend's husband's funeral, very oddly, and she introduced me to her nephew, who was in his 40s, and he said, "Oh, I've read all your books," he said, "and I've just worked out, having seen you now for the first time, you're Carol, aren't you?" And I thought, "Oh, which aspect of my
right,
appearance said I was Carol?"
right,
Um, and basically, uh, I don't know whether my friend had said something about my background and what kind of work, and that I had been an Intel analyst,
mm,
but that sort of shook me a bit. I thought, this is somebody who doesn't know me at all and has recognized me in the book.
right,
So yeah, that was difficult. And then he said, Carol didn't get married until she was 50 because she'd been a career woman and previous relationships hadn't worked out. Does that apply to you too? And I said,
right.
no. No, my hubby and I have been together for half a century, um, but it just seemed to fit basically with the story. I wanted her to meet this widowed murder detective. So then he said, "And is your husband an ex-detective?" And I said, "No, but he did work in law enforcement in a certain capacity."
Mm,
And that it's really funny actually. It's funnier when other people on whom you've based a character suddenly realize it's them and say, "Oh, is that me?"
yeah. So he could make it. I mean, it sounds like this grilling from this chap at the funeral would make a good scene in something.
Yes,
We are we
definitely.
are we're very nosy, aren't we, as writers? I have to apologize up front to people when I say I'm a 2-year-old, I'm a writer. I want to know everything about everything. Please tell me everything about everything. I remember going to we went bowling a few years ago, and there was a manager. He had manager on his lapel on his badge, and he had, I think, 3 stars. Whereas I'd gone to the bar and got a drink, and the lady, younger, much younger than him, had got 5 stars. So the ping in me. So I went up to the manager and I said, "You'll have to excuse me, but I'm a writer and I'm really nosy. Why have you only got 3 stars and yet you're the manager when your bar lady has got 5 stars?" And he said, "Every time we know a job inside and out, we get a star." So I thought, well, really, she should be the manager then if she's done 5 different aspects. So that may appear in something. Andy,
Mm.
we'll come back to you and have a look at your book.
Okay. Can you see it?
Back a bit, yep, back a
Back a
bit.
bit.
That's it. Yeah, it's not
Yes.
very clear. It's on your page, so I'll
Yes.
invite everybody to go on your page. So this
Yes.
recording will be embedded on your page. Do you feature Andy in the book at all?
Yes, I do, because I'm a big part of how I first met Nasser in
Mm,
Syria when I was working there,
mm.
and how he accidentally ended up with me during lockdown. So there's that wraparound, and also Nasser's daughter has written her part of the story in the book,
Okay.
looking back at when she was 7 years old,
Yeah.
and the adults were whispering, but she sort of knew that something had gone wrong and her father wasn't around. And everybody said he was on a special operation, but he was actually in prison.
Wow.
And then, with the bombs falling in Damascus and they're fleeing from Syria, she explains it in her own words. And I really hope that I have the three different voices, Nasser's voice, her
Sure.
voice, and a bit of my voice in the
Yeah.
book. But not me as a person, me as sort of explaining the story along, giving it an anchor.
Sure. And were there any, because obviously it's Nasser's story,
Yeah,
and his life,
yeah.
were there any people that you had to, effectively characters that you had to leave out, or he didn't want in for any reason, it was just too close to home?
Um, the characters who've just got sort of one name are people he knew, but he didn't want fully named.
Hmm.
But the person who put a gun at his head, he was quite happy to sort of name and shame him.
Yeah.
And, and the people who were sort of his bosses and his co-workers, he sort of named them for their part
Sure.
in the collapse of the country.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Um, this is fairly early on in your writing career, but we have the question from Jill in the chat. Do Obviously it's slightly reworded for you, but do panelists who appear wholly as themselves in the stories ever have a problem with reader questions requiring an answer that feels too soul bearing? Do you find that say for instance, when we get to, obviously you and Denise will be chatting because she'll be your moderator ahead of time, but do you think there's something that, obviously NASA, I know from what you've told me, because you were at MK Lit Fest, as was I,
yes.
that he was due to go on stage, and when it came to it, it was just too difficult.
Yeah.
Do you feel, having, because you've known him and you've written your story, whether you feel that you've taken on the burden of maybe there are things that you don't want to share, whether from your point of view or on his behalf?
Um, I probably sort of go into the background and sort of ask him if it's okay if, or I tell him that things that I have said.
Mm.
There was somebody at the tennis club who said to Nasser before the book was published, "Oh yes," he said, I know your story," and he said to me, he said, "What did you tell him?"
Right.
And I said, "I explained." That this is what you needed. And so I gave him the background story and oh yes, that's okay. And and sometimes I know that he just can't sort of share what's inside him. And other times he will just tell the whole story.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's come out of writing the book, he said how cathartic it is.
Mm.
It's lifted a lot off his shoulders,
Mm.
from all that he sort of went through. And his issues didn't sort of finish when he got out of prison. He left the country, and like thousands of other people, he was trying to find his feet in another country and establish himself. And he was very badly rejected by Sweden. And it was only when he ended up in Britain that they actually recognized that
Mm.
he had PTSD and he was mentally quite sick from all that he had been through over the previous years. So he's got a lot of love for this country, and I hope that that comes through
Mm.
in the book.
And
And I think we as a country should be proud of the fact that we do look after people, despite the current rhetoric.
absolutely. It's interesting that you say it's cathartic, because I know from a writing point of view, joking aside about my ex next door neighbour, I say the four E's about writing fiction and reading fiction, or reading any book really, is to be educated, feel some form of emotion, and especially towards the end, at the end where, hooray, the baddie's been murdered or caught or jailed, whatever, and then to be entertained, and find some kind of escape. And writing, I'm sure there are certain things we would want to do in real life that we can't do, that we're able to do through our fiction. Did you find, Andy, that it was cathartic for you to share his story, your story?
Um, In lots of ways, yes, but I actually felt I was sort of living his story as I was writing his story.
Mm,
We sat on the sofa together and we had the recordings going,
right.
and he'd tell me something, and then I would sort of reorder it into words, and then I would sort of put it into the book, and then I would think, how would I feel if I was in that situation? And I actually know that I wouldn't be half the person that he is for
Mm,
all that he's been through.
yeah.
So yes, it's been quite an eye opener for me, really,
Right.
and I actually sort of admire him as a person
Oh,
much more for
absolutely.
sort of knowing everything that he's been through and how he can still stand tall today.
Yeah. So we'll go Beth and Graham, then Denise. Final words. How I can't even say it now. Uh, the therapy of writing. How
Yes,
therapeutic you
definitely
find
good
it.
good therapy. I I think that you can tell because it, if I start doing a bit of writing, I've got to clear the decks because I get into it and I completely lose time. Um, and so you know that you have been in the zone when you've had a good writing day.
Mm. Graham.
Uh, I have to say, my mental health generally is a lot better when I'm writing regularly. So from that point of view alone, it is very therapeutic. Um, I think some of the themes that I cover, particularly in the new series, because I try to deal with some social issues along the way.
Mm,
They aren't necessarily ones that I've experienced directly myself, but I did spend 3 years working on a project with Citizens Advice, which meant that I came into contact with a lot of people who have a lot of need and lack of support. And so it's not directly, because I'd already written Borderline before I went to work for Citizens Advice, or at least First Draft.
mm,
But it's given me an opportunity to write about issues that I feel are very important
mm,
whilst not being banging the drum, if you like. It's merged in. I've actually just had a review from another author for ready to put on book two, and he did comment on the fact that he loved the way that I'd managed to mention these issues, but without overdoing it. And it does make the reader think. Well, hopefully that's what I'm planning for. But I think just so long answer, but I think really just doing that, it gives me a lot of satisfaction. So catharsis probably isn't the right word, um, but it's
that is a
it
satisfaction for
is
sure.
good. It
Well,
absolutely.
my favourite statistic, and I'm the world's worst because I write in sort of batches, but I keep I make sure I don't have any appointments other than these, any appointments before noon, so that I can write all morning. And my favourite statistic is 300 words a day is 109,500 words in a non-leap year. And do I write 300 words a day? From next Monday, I have a deadline this Friday. So from the Saturday, because the book will go back on Friday when it's due, if not before. So yes, I endeavour to do my 300 words a day, and more than that, because I do love. Once I get going, I don't want to stop. Um,
Well, that's you raise a point. Sorry,
yeah,
but
no, carry
just
on.
I actually find that if I give myself a low target, I write a lot more
Mm.
because it's achievable. It's easy. I don't have to think, oh
Exactly,
God, how the hell am I going to do that?
exactly.
And I just get on with it and do it. And I generally find that I write
Yeah,
sometimes two or three times as much as I expect to do.
yeah, that's brilliant. Denise, final word from you.
Catharsis. Oh, yes. Um, well, the thing I like about writing, I mean, it's self-indulgence, it's self-fulfillment, it's all kind of good things.
Mm,
But as you know, I had a recent, well, what, 3 years ago almost now, I had a very bad experience where I was very badly treated by a couple of other authors. And so my latest book, Murder at the Festival, is definitely cathartic. And in fact, my daughter's a psychotherapist, and she said, Mum, you're never going to get over this until you get it out and write it in a book and
Kill them off.
just make sure nobody's going to sue you. And so that was incredibly cathartic. And I ran it by a few people to make sure I wouldn't be sued, but it certainly cheered me up a great deal. So you can actually derive a lot of catharsis by, through your writing. So yeah, definitely.
Or don't they say change the names to protect the not innocent?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Andy, lovely to see you. Thank you to Jill in the chat for your question. Thank you, Beth, Graeme, and Denise. And see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Morgan.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morgan.
Enjoy.